What's up, everybody? It's Luther Wilson III here on another YouTube real estate session, talking about contract for deeds. All right, so continuing that series. Actually, I'd say wrapping up that series. I'm probably gonna do this session and maybe circle back on some other items in the future. But for those that don't know, I'm a real estate professional here in the Kansas City market, represent for Upside Property Services and the affiliate companies. We serve real estate investors. We invest in real estate. We do creative financing and so forth. And so I've been on talking about seller financing, doing a contract for deed series. In today's session, I want to get into the operations and how to handle contract for deeds. Okay, so the last few sessions that I did were in regard to how to structure contract for deeds as seller finance transactions, the documents and disclosures that we use. And now I want to get into more so managing those assets or managing those properties once you've got them performing. All right, so there's three big things that I think of when I think about real estate investing and business in general. And I think about capital, I think about strategy, and I think about operations, okay? And when it comes to real estate investing and what we do in particular, the strategy piece I spoke on as I went through the contract for deed series, talking about different ways to create cash flow and so forth. In previous videos, I've talked about the capital piece, the funding, the financing, the gap funds, the private equity, the private capital, and so forth. And then the operations, I've touched on a little bit in at least one other video, but I want to continue, talking more about operations. And it's a little different for seller finance transactions because we're not really renting the house out. And so if we were renting, or if you look at traditional landlording, whether it's, short-term, medium-term, long-term rentals, you got various aspects that you have to deal with. It's going to be more, management intensive, and it's going to be more costly. You got tenants and toilets and so forth. And, a lot of times tenants don't necessarily stay as long, right? And when you're doing seller financing, you're selling the property essentially, okay? It could be an installment agreement, it could be a lease purchase, depending on how you structure it. And the whole mindset, the whole process is different because the people in the homes have an ownership interest in one way or another, however, depending on how you structure it. And so they treat it different. It's their home more so than just a property or a place that they're going to stay for the time being. So this is, by doing seller financing, in our case, in Kansas and Missouri, we're in the Kansas City market, and contract for deed has been very favorable. So for those investors out there who might be interested in getting, $20,000 down per property on a B-class single family home, that's been our average down payment over the last 5+ years, is just over $20,000. So you as an investor or a property owner could walk away with at least $9,000 to $15,000 doing a seller finance transaction. And then from there, you can continue to get revenue, you get cash flow without as much in the way of management headaches, expenses, and so forth. So it's a win-win all the way around. And so I wanted to touch on that to get y'all hopefully a little bit excited about the idea, to get you to understand why I've been digging in deeper to contract for deed, seller financing, how to make it happen, because we've seen so much success with it, my partners and I, my clients, and so forth. All right. So when it comes to handling or managing a contract for deed, all right, in our case, you have the buyers in the home, they're making the payment to you, their monthly payment includes principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, okay? And in the agreement, it's stated clearly that they take care of the upkeep and the management, or the upkeep and the maintenance and so forth with the property. So that frees you up, okay? So, right, I mentioned The 3Ds. I can't go without mentioning the 3Ds. There's 3 scary Ds that I talk about for seller finance transactions. And you can refer to a previous video on that. And those 3 scary Ds are default situations, Dodd-Frank, and due on sale clause. Okay, because that ties in with how to handle situations when those situations may come up. And of those 3, the defaults, the Dodd-Frank situations, the due on sale clause, the one that comes up the most is default situations. And it's not so much defaults, complete defaults yet, but people that end up paying late or they get behind and then they have to get back on track. So that's a key part of managing the note or managing the residence. Okay, there's still some type of asset management. You got to think of whatever you want to call it, all right? So they're responsible of taking care of the property. They're paying you each month. You actually get net cash flow. And however, they may get off track. Human beings, people get sick, people die, people get disabled. We get snowstorms and we get pandemics and lockdowns and all kinds of stuff that happens, right? And so we've had people that end up paying a little bit late, but because we're a little bit more proactive and we have somewhat of a good business working relationship with the residents, me or whoever you're working with, right, can contact the resident via phone call or text message, right? And you can say, hey, what's the situation? What's going on? Here's what needs to happen. If it's late after the 5th, tell them that. If it's late after the 10th, tell them that. There's a 5% or 10% late fee, right? In our case, we charge, a percentage of the monthly principal and interest amount. And in our case, after the 10th, all right? So that's just how we do it. You can choose how you want to operate it, all right? And we communicate with the residents. That's another reason why we've had such good success rate too, because a lot of times on a traditional real estate transaction, the mortgage companies, not going to reach out to the residents to try to get them on board. Like they may do some type of letters or whatever, but they're probably not going to get a human being that reaches out to them in any way, right? So that's some things to distinguish between managing a rental and then managing a seller finance note. Okay, so those are key parts there, because again, number 1 reason we're doing this, number 2 reasons we're doing these, right? Help create more home ownership opportunities, and then also helping investors, landlords, exhausted house flippers, maybe buy back some of their time, maybe get some of that passive income that we've all dreamed about and thought about before we even thought about doing real estate. And then you can free yourself up, add another tool to your arsenal. You don't have to stop flipping. You don't have to stop doing rentals. You can keep doing what you got to do, but another stream of revenue that is more passive, truly more passive, not completely, right? That's why I'm getting into how we operate this thing, all right? Capital, strategy, operations, okay? Using seller financing as a strategy to either buy or resell. In our case, resell, right? Managing the assets, right? That's part of the operations. Servicing the notes, okay? So besides you or someone on your team, managing the assets yourself or managing the notes yourself, you could also look at, outsourcing to a third-party servicing company. There's escrow companies, there's title companies that are affiliated. They have escrow services where for $20 to $40 a month, they can collect the payment from your resident, and then they, will then send money to the mortgage company if you have a mortgage in place. And you just got to be mindful what their role is, okay? Because I know for me, sometimes some investors kind of expect that, hey, the note servicing company is going to do certain things, or hey, we hired a property manager, right? That's a common one, or a contractor, another common one. We expected them to do X, Y, and Z, and how often does that really, really work out, right? I'm just saying. So you can relate to the note servicing companies. If you, it's really pretty simple to figure out how to service them yourselves. I do suppose if you're scaling rapidly and you have several and you want to outsource it for the time being, odds are very good that you will soon see like, hey, this is pretty simple. You can bring it in-house somehow, which I think a lot of investors end up doing with their assets, with their rentals, bringing it in-house, whatever they can, the construction, the management aspects and so forth. So you could do the same type of thing, but just letting y'all know there are other ways to be able to operate these seller finance transactions that can free you up a little bit, okay? And then if you can set, for a number of our buyers, we set them up on automatic ACH each month, so we don't have to worry about it. And then there's different websites, different services that you could use to track things and so forth. All right, so another key aspect, and it really kind of depends on how you structure your seller finance transaction. That helps determine how you manage the asset or how you manage the note. If you have it structured as a contract for deed, things get handled a certain way. If you have it structured as a lease purchase or rent to own, things get handled, or they're structured definitely a different way and they're handled a little bit different. Again, if you have a traditional rental, long-term, short-term, or medium-term, all of those have to be, managed and handled a certain way because they're structured a certain way. So that's a key part to it as well when you're talking about managing residence, lease option, contract for deed. In our case, a contract for deed. So at the end of the year, each of our buyers needs to get a 1098. It's an escrow analysis, okay? And it breaks down how much they have left owed on their mortgage, on their note, okay? And then it also states how much they paid in taxes and insurance for the escrow for that year. And in some cases, the cost of the taxes and insurance goes up. So in that escrow analysis, the 1098 that we send out each year to our contract for deed buyers, it lets them know how much is owed, if their payment's gonna go up because the escrow went up. Again, their principal and interest payment's gonna remain the same for the entire length of the note. In our case, a lot of ours are 30 years, fully amortized, fixed interest rate, no prepayment penalty. Again, no balloon on that. So it's pretty simple to look at the amortization schedule, which I broke some of these down in the last few videos when I talked about the documents and disclosures. It's now tying in with how we handle and manage these and operate our real estate investment firm, okay? So end of the year, the 1098 breakdown, how much the buyers owe us, how many years are left, right? Not necessarily on a 1098 how many years are left, but if the taxes and insurance went up dramatically, then we're gonna let them know, hey, your payment is now going from $1,000 a month, PITI, for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Your payment now goes to $1,100 a month, PITI, okay? And we'll send them that form, okay? So that they have it for the records. They can use it for tax purposes, again, because they have an ownership interest in the home, and they can receive tax benefits for that, okay? Don't want to get in the weeds too much there, but the 1098, managing the payments, communicating with the residents, okay, those are aspects of managing these notes or managing your seller finance transactions, okay? So those are the key parts that I wanted to go over. I think I got everything in depth. Please refer back to, I did a couple different videos, one in which I talked about the 3 scary Ds. That definitely ties in with this. And then I've done a couple other videos on seller finance transactions, the different ways to be able to do them, whether you're buying or selling. And then I get into contract for deeds pretty heavy, okay? So tune into those. And again, tap in, even if you're not in Kansas City, even if you have no interest in investing in Kansas City, you could do this type of thing in different markets, wherever you own property type of thing. So I'm happy to connect with people if they want to dig in more. You can do a strategy session. For those that are interested in Kansas City, definitely keep us in mind, because we've seen a push the last few years, especially with real estate investors who are seeing amazing opportunities and results with seller financing. And one other thing that leads me to, before I wrap up, I have to mention the number of these that you could do. That's part of handling these, right? If you're going to do contract for deeds, you have to be mindful that if you do more than 3 in one calendar year, you're in violation of Dodd-Frank. So you had to determine, okay, after we do 3 installment agreements or 3 true seller carrybacks or 3 wraps or 3 contract for deeds, right? As a seller, are we going to continue in that regard? Maybe using different ownership, it's however you think you could do it, or are you going to look at doing lease options or some type of rent to own if you're planning to do a substantial amount of volume of these, so you're not, violating Dodd-Frank and that sort of thing. So that ties in to managing these. And if you are interested in the Kansas City market and you want to explore doing contract for deeds or lease options, definitely plug in with me. Again, the investors that I've helped, my partners and so forth, we've been able to get large down payments of basically 10% down on what I push, B-class single family homes. So you're talking on these investments, you could do the rentals, still consider those short-term, long-term, medium-term, however that looks. And then you may want to consider this if you like getting large chunks of monies, recouping some of your capital, or just stacking more capital and more passive income, maybe not completely passive. It's definitely residual, where you're getting revenue from your investments, and those are a good 200 to 400, in some cases 400 or 500 a month net cash flow, just FYI. So again, tap in. Appreciate you tuning in. It's Luther Wilson, Upside Property Services, Kansas City Real Estate all day. All right, peace.